Have you ever poured your absolute soul into a message, desperately trying to articulate how much his sudden distance is hurting you, only to be met with a cold, devastatingly empty silence? It's a terribly specific kind of agony, being ignored by the very person you are fighting for, isn't it? But what if I told you that the only conceivable way to make a man truly hear you is to completely stop speaking? Welcome to Destiny's Decree. Today we are decoding the power vacuum, a psychological maneuver so utterly precise that it forces him to experience the exact panic he has been casually inflicting upon you. It is the ultimate invisible blow. Master this today, and I promise you, you will never have to beg for a man's attention again. You've probably been told 1,000 times that if a man pulls away, you must immediately cut him off, block his number, and storm out in a blaze of righteous glory. It sounds terribly empowering in theory, doesn't it? The problem is, when you react with explosive anger or theatrical silence, you are still handing him the keys to your emotional kingdom. He sits there perfectly comfortable, knowing exactly how much his behavior affects you. It's a bit like slamming a door to show you don't care. The sheer force of the slam proves you care entirely too much. You see, the male ego is a fascinating, highly predictable little engine that thrives on metrics and emotional reactions. When he acts out or withdraws, he is subconsciously waiting for your temperature to rise. Your anger, your long paragraphs of explanation, or your dramatic attempts at no contact are all data points telling him he is firmly in the driver's seat. He doesn't mind if you are furious, darling. He only minds if you are indifferent. Your visible rage simply validates his continued significance in your daily life. But what happens when we remove the anger and replace it with a rather more lethal strategy? Enter the concept of weaponized silence, or what I prefer to call the power vacuum. This isn't about ignoring him as a petty punishment whilst waiting desperately for him to notice your absence. It is about a calculated emotional withdrawal whilst remaining entirely, unapologetically present. You don't need to delete his number, you simply remove the warmth, the access, and the emotional investment he has grown so terribly accustomed to receiving for free. Let us look at a practical scenario. He cancels your weekend plans at the very last minute with a rather flimsy excuse. The old you might have sent a passive-aggressive text or ignored him for 3 days whilst obsessively checking his read receipts on your phone. The sovereign you, however, simply replies, "Not a problem, enjoy your evening," and then actually goes out to have a spectacular night, perhaps taking yourself out for a rather nice glass of wine. You remain impeccably polite, yet utterly, devastatingly unreachable. By remaining in his orbit but turning down your emotional temperature to a freezing point, you strip him of the very thing he relies upon, your predictability. He can still see you, he can still speak to you, but his spiritual access to your mind has been firmly revoked. This sudden, inexplicable void doesn't just confuse him, it fundamentally alters the reality he thought he controlled. But to truly understand why this polite ghosting makes a man completely unravel, we must examine the rather fascinating chaos it causes within his brain's chemical reward system. To understand why this shift is so devastatingly effective, we must take a brief, rather clinical look into the architecture of the male mind. Men, by their very nature, are creatures of pattern recognition and cause and effect mechanics. When he behaves in a certain way, be it pulling away, offering breadcrumbs of affection, or acting altogether inconsistent, he expects a specific corresponding reaction from you. This predictable loop of your anxiety and his reassurance is what fuels his internal reward system, providing a steady, reliable drip of dopamine to his ego. Think of it as a rather uninspired slot machine. Every time he pulls the lever by acting distant or sending a vague, non-committal text, he expects the machine to dispense the jackpot, your emotional investment, your paragraphs of worry, or your visible frustration. That reaction is his metric for success. It tells him quite clearly that he still possesses the power to disrupt your peace. As long as he can predict your emotional weather, he feels entirely safe and completely in control of the romantic dynamic. But the power vacuum introduces a catastrophic malfunction into his little dopamine machine. When you remain in his life, answering his messages or sitting across from him at a dinner table, but your warmth is entirely switched off, you deny him that crucial chemical hit. He pulls the lever and absolutely nothing happens. There is no anger, no pleading, just a serene, impenetrable wall of polite indifference. It is a psychological shock to the system, far more jarring than if you had simply blocked him in a fit of passionate rage. Imagine he sends one of those classic low-effort messages on a Friday night. Thinking of you, sorry I've been so terribly busy. He is fully prepared for you to either demand an explanation or eagerly accept his miserable breadcrumbs. Instead, you reply hours later with a simple, "No worries, have a lovely weekend," before returning to your skincare routine or laughing over a cocktail with your dearest friends. You haven't ignored him, which would indicate you are playing a game. You have simply demonstrated that his absence has not derailed your universe in the slightest. This sudden, profound deprivation of his usual emotional reward triggers an immediate dopamine crash. The comfortable illusion of control evaporates, replaced by a creeping, icy panic. The man who thought he had you securely tucked away in his pocket suddenly realizes you are untouchable, even though you're standing right in front of him. This sudden anxiety will force him to frantically try and fill the void he himself created. However, understanding the psychology is merely the foundation. The true mastery lies in the flawless, almost surgical execution of this silence in your daily reality. I understand perfectly well that executing this in reality is a terribly daunting prospect. It is wonderfully simple to strategize about emotional withdrawal when you are feeling strong, but quite another to maintain it when your phone lights up with his name and your anxiety demands a swift resolution. You must suppress the urge to fix the silence, to seek clarity, or to explain your sudden change in demeanor. This requires an ironclad discipline that goes entirely against your natural, empathetic instinct to nurture and repair a fractured connection. The first theater of this psychological warfare takes place in your messaging. The amateur's mistake is to deliberately wait 10 hours to reply, thinking this displays power. Frankly, it merely signals that you are sitting by your phone, bitterly calculating the minutes. The truly sovereign approach is to respond in a natural fashion, but with the emotional resonance of a highly efficient, terribly bored personal assistant. Your messages must become impeccably polite, utterly brief, and completely devoid of emojis, exclamation marks, or follow-up questions. Let us say he texts you mid-week with a rather casual "How was your day?" hoping to spark a comforting, reassuring conversation. Instead of regaling him with the intricacies of your afternoon or asking about his, you deliver a polite but devastatingly sterile response. "It was fine, thank you." And then, absolute silence. You do not ask how he is, you do not offer a prompt to keep the conversation alive. you simply drop the conversational ball on the floor and politely walk away, leaving him to stare at a thoroughly uninspiring screen. The second phase is what I call the physical freeze, which is essential if you happen to share the same environment or cross paths. You do not storm past him or violently refuse to meet his eye, which would be dreadfully juvenile. Instead, you treat him precisely as you would an acquaintance you vaguely remember from a remarkably dull dinner party. If he speaks, you answer politely, but your gaze looks through him rather than at him. Your energy is entirely contained, focused on the book in your hand, your surroundings, or the far more interesting thoughts in your own mind. The golden rule of this execution is that you must never appear angry, resentful, or wounded, for those emotions are the very currency he desperately wishes to collect. You are simply existing on a higher, rather exclusive frequency to which he currently lacks the security clearance. You are gracefully evicting him from the penthouse of your attention and placing him squarely in the lobby. But to maintain this devastating posture without crumbling under the emotional pressure, one must cultivate a very specific internal architecture. Ultimately, the most crucial distinction you must grasp is the difference between cheap manipulation and sovereign self-protection. The amateur employs silence as a rather blunt instrument, hoping to bludgeon a man into submission or a state of panic. But a woman who truly understands her own immense value uses the power vacuum simply to protect her own energetic field. You are not withdrawing your warmth to punish him. You are doing it because he hasn't paid the required toll to bask in your sunlight. Why on earth should you continue offering premium access to someone who only offers discount behavior? You see, your time, your emotional labor, and your words are exceedingly expensive currencies, and you must politely decline to spend them on men who are emotionally bankrupt. When you endlessly explain your feelings to a man who resolutely refuses to understand, you are essentially throwing fine pearls before rather unappreciative swine. The sovereign mindset dictates that your presence is a luxury, not a basic human right. When his actions demonstrate that he is taking that privilege for granted, you do not throw a theatrical tantrum. You simply quietly close the VIP lounge. However, to execute this flawlessly without unraveling, your internal architecture must be entirely authentic. You cannot simply pretend to be detached whilst internally screaming with anxiety or obsessively checking his social media from a fabricated account. Men are remarkably adept at sensing the subtle vibration of desperation, even if you never speak a single syllable. You must genuinely reach a point of elegant surrender, where you are perfectly content with the outcome, whether he violently course-corrects or simply fades away. Your silence must be born from authentic peace, not tactical panic. When you finally achieve this sublime state of grace, the power dynamic shifts in a manner that is utterly irrevocable. It is the precise moment he looks across the table and realizes that whilst he can physically hold your hand, he can no longer reach your soul. He realizes he has pushed you just an inch too far, and the warm, forgiving woman he took for granted has been replaced by an impenetrable fortress. Silence in this context is not empty. It is mathematically precise, delivering a devastating message that no amount of screaming ever could. But of course, human nature is painfully predictable, and the inevitable will soon happen. Deprived of his usual dopamine and entirely unnerved by the sudden vacuum, he will eventually crack under the pressure. He will come rushing back armed with elaborate apologies, grand gestures, and a sudden, miraculous clarity about your worth. Yet how you handle this inevitable return will dictate whether you remain the sovereign queen of the dynamic or if you simply slip back into his trap. The way you receive his panic is perhaps the most dangerous test of all.
So when he finally breaks the silence and returns,
because they invariably do once the dopamine runs dry. Will you be ready to maintain your sovereign boundaries, or will you allow him back into the VIP lounge for free? I am terribly curious to hear your experiences with this particular dynamic. Tell me in the comments below, have you ever employed weaponized silence, and precisely how long did it take for his ego to fracture and bring him rushing back? Let us compare notes. If you are finally ready to stop merely reacting and begin commanding the hidden dynamics of your romantic life, I cordially invite you to subscribe to Destiny's Decree and turn on the notification bell. Join our inner circle and master the true psychology of relationships. Until next time, stay poised, stay utterly sovereign, and never let them see you sweat.